Hey, I was watching this video by this character, FD signifier here. He'll be on the screen in a moment. That's Jordan Peterson. I have this video muted for now. Um, it's this video he has called Dissecting the Manosphere. He's talking about this idea of the manosphere, which is basically as he defines it, a loosely connected group of content creators, the red pill community types. Um, he I found it so interesting as I was watching the video, the way his arguments take the form of the way that typical liberals the typical liberal style of argumentation that you see nowadays, and I thought this was such a perfect example of it that I wanted to make a video to sort of just talk about how this comes up and the sorts of tactics that they're using to camouflage their ways of really saying nothing is what I'm is beneath the surface. He hasn't said a word about the topic he claims to be dissecting, which you'll find out if you ever as we go through here. But let's skip ahead here because the first thing he does is well, the first section of the video that has anything to do with the topic, the intro obviously is fine, but then you've got the white dudes section. So I'll let him talk a little bit, so I'm not straw manning him, and then we'll hear what he's saying about it and take it from there.
A lot over the past year as a creator and learned more about just being more professional at this job and even got an editor. And I've also kind of like had to engage with the unique responsibility of existing as a male creator on BreadTube or LeftTube, especially as a black male creator on BreadTube or LeftTube with a relatively significant following. I've attained a space where people value my content, and I want to honor that sense of respect to people liking what I have to say and wanting to know about my opinions on certain things. As really a lot of things have begun to fully settle in my head, I've often wanted to return to this topic of edgelords, but with more perspective, more research, more empathy, more voices, more everything really. Another thing that hit me is how it would be unique on some level to talk about the subject of this topic in the same way that I talked about Nicki Minaj in my last video, where I made sure to bring on black films who had been there in the moment to experience Nicki's rise. Or when I talked about black love a little while ago, and made sure to bring in people with a variety of experiences of loving or being loved while black. I've long noticed, however, that when it comes to talking about whiteness and white men, although of course it's usually white men doing all of the talking, they never fully occupy the space solely as a subject. The same way that non white or non men do when other topics arise. We tend to situate being white and male as a default status with minimal need to assess or examine it critically as a specific intersection of identity. We don't look.
I don't know. This is a straw man. I don't know who is we. I don't know who we is. He's basically saying that everybody assumes the white male as the default, and I just don't believe that that's true. I think that white males may assume that because they're living their own lives through their subjective experience, but I don't believe you for a moment that most black people or any group of people go through life as, applying all of their critical thinking, assuming that they're a white person, a white man. That doesn't make any sense. He's not saying anything. And by the way, this was very poorly labeled. He didn't say anything about white people for like 2 minutes. But anyway, that's a small thing.
Look at being white and being male as its own thing and not as a control group for other things to be compared to. When we think of intersectionality, we never think that white maleness is an intersection when it is. But even just me evoking the concept of intersection.
I mean, again, what I mean, listen to the way he said that. We don't think of being white and male as being an identity. Who is we? I'm a white male. I definitely know that I have an identity. I'm certain of that. And it involves being having white skin and being a male. I promise you it does. So he's like, "Oh, people don't think white men are actual things, people with identities, but they are." Wow. What a great insight. Thank you. Thank you.
Intersectionality and saying the intersection of whiteness and maleness and for the most part cisgendered and hetero, that's somewhat transgressive. And I know from experience that there are going to be those who are uncomfortable with evoking such a standpoint or critical lens to talk about white men. And I get that. So this video was not supposed to start like this. It was not supposed to start at the editing table. However, 99% of this video was written and recorded over 2 weeks ago. And in that time, there have been 3 spree shootings to hit the media that we know of, and possibly even more. This video was meant to be an examination of the manosphere and serve as my perspective on it as a whole, from its history to its reason for existing to its less toxic elements, all the way over to the extreme portions of it that in some ways lead to what we have been seeing these past few weeks. The first major chunk of this video may
I mean, first of all, it's so muddled. All right, all right. I realize I'm complaining about something, but you labeled it white dudes 3 minutes ago. He so far the only thing he said about white men is that they exist, that they have identities. That's it. And now he's going on about spree shootings in the middle of the white dudes section, which is a very interesting thing because Uvalde shooter wasn't white. Most mass shooters actually aren't white. If you go with gang violence as a metric, but I realize that you're not allowed to do that because that goes against the narrative. Mass shootings are a problem, are a violence problem. You don't. There's no need to connect. If you want to bring race into it, all right, let's be honest. If you want to bring race into it, we can, but it's going to look a lot worse for non-whites. If you want to look at gun violence, all right, it's going to look really bad for one group of people in particular, if that's what you want to do. Now, I don't want to do that. I don't think we should do that. I think it's more important to look at the violence as what's causing the violence as a society. All right, before we start picking apart smaller things like race, we should tackle the bigger problem. Like there's a violence problem in the world, in our country. Okay, there's a violence problem. It's not a gun violence problem. It's not a racist violence problem. Okay, there's a violence problem because people are angry, people are upset. Okay, now I'm ranting. But anyway, the way he situates this conversation about the spree shootings in the middle of the white dudes section, uh, it's so unbelievably dishonest. And by the way, it's incredibly muddled. Again, what did he even say here? Uh, he didn't say anything that had anything to do with the shooting. He just inserted this random clip, and he's not saying. Anyway, let's go.
before the recent news takes a empathetic and inquisitive look at the types of boys and men and behavior that we often associate with spree shooters. I make a relatively transgressive argument that says that we need to look explicitly at the intersection between whiteness and maleness, and it's awkward. It feels weird to do that, and it feels even weirder and almost.
Okay, I just want to point out one more. I'm going to let him talk more, but I want to point out one last thing. He is literally saying to his audience, because he knows his audience. He's really stepping out on a limb here, right, to his audience. He's saying, I know some of you are going to be really upset about this, but white men are people. I know, I know, I know. That's hard to listen. I know, I get it. Please don't cancel him. I know. Please listen. Just listen. Just let me talk. All right. I've got an hour and 20 minutes left. You got to let me talk. But first things first, I'm sorry to tell you that I've come to believe white men are people. Yes, I have.
Almost kind of gross under the circumstances. However, this is based on research I did
Fucking
for my
asshole. What
PhD
the fuck? It's
program, which
gross.
I am not finishing. Don't ask, but life is too short. And my research tells me that this is a sound and reasonable angle to engage with to make sense of these types of events and the manosphere as a whole. And later in the video, I do take a more critical look at spree shootings and specifically this type of gendered spectacle violence, and how really in a lot of ways we don't have the best understanding of how race plays into it. However, under the circumstances, my fear is that the tone of this first chunk combined with the energy around this topic right now might turn people off initially, especially since I know most people won't watch more than the first 30 minutes of this video. If I'm lucky, this video's long as hell. I'm sorry, I had a lot to say. I think my explanation and examination of this particular part of the issue is useful and even more timely considering the situation, but paradoxically, it's also poorly timed because all of us are still going through this right now in the moment. And it's not always easy to jump into a philosophical discussion about an ongoing current crisis. So, in the end, what I'm really asking for here is that you give me grace. And if you can, watch the whole video, watch it in chunks. There's chapters in the description. This was a tough video to make even before the recent events. But all that said, I'm definitely not the
What is so tough about this, man? This is your job. This is you're signing up to do this. Give me a break. It was tough. Oh, it was so tough to make. Oh, sit down in front of and edit on my ass for hours and not really say anything and get paid a lot of money. Oh, it was really tough, guys. Please just give me a break, please, guys, please.
final voice on this topic, and I'm sure that there are some things that I will get wrong or miss completely. But my heart is in the right place, I promise. Okay, now that the dramatic tension that I envisioned when making this video has been thoroughly destroyed, let's just go ahead and start it anyway. But I personally think that this is part of the problem, really. By leaving white men as this box that is perpetually. But I personally think that this is part of the problem, really. By leaving white men as this box that is perpetually checked when we begin to analyze social issues, we leave a lot of details and information underdeveloped. Now, I don't know if what I'm about to do will work because I am doing something a bit transgressive, but that's the nature of science. So if it doesn't work, I'm sure somebody will come behind me and fix it. And if it does work, maybe we'll do something special here. And to make it work as best as I can, I have made the effort to talk to some white dudes, all of which have that unique standpoint of the edgelord identity that can provide some perspective explicitly about how whiteness and maleness contributes to it. And if this video's length is an indicator, shit may get complex, so we shall see.
I wonder if for one moment any of these white men that he's about to talk to uh, have any engagement with the manosphere, or whether they're active in it. I guarantee he didn't interview any creators of it, right? Well, I already know he didn't because I've seen it, but I'm just telling you. I mean, listen to these guys talk, all right? These guys are already, they're going to agree. Are you kidding me? These guys are scared shitless. You're going to tell me these three guys have an incredibly difficult task to maintain their facade as this nice guy, soy boy liberal type, right? I love, I'm a feminist, social justice warrior, Black Lives Matter, all cops are bastards. Yeah, cultural Marxist, whatever that means, right? That's these guys, their whole identity, their whole oeuvre, right, is that they have to uphold that no matter what. So this guy, FD Signifier, right, this high status black guy in the liberal sphere, which basically makes him a god, right? So he can nothing he's going to say is ever going to be disagreed with in this sphere here. No way. If you want to call the femisphere, I don't know what this is. If there's an equivalent. Anyway, this guy these guys are scared out of their fucking minds, dude, like to disagree, like whatever is FD signifier, I guarantee he's going to ask these questions. These guys are going to be dancing around it, coming up with ridiculous explanations. My point is, these guys aren't objective. This is just oh, I interviewed some white guys who are going to agree with everything I say. Well, good job. Why don't you interview some people who disagree with you? There's some if you did for, and you know why they don't, because they would look so stupid if you interviewed Poor Man's Podcast, if you interviewed um I don't know, any number of these guys that are well spoken, and they understand the message of the manosphere is about self-improvement, about it being becoming the best man you can be, and regardless of your situation in life, it's about saying to, to hell with any reason why I can't do it. I'm just going to try and do it anyway. Yeah, okay. If black people are oppressed in this society, and this is what I've heard Poor Man's Podcast say, then I'm just going to have to live with that, but I'm not going to let that be a reason to get in my way. I'm not going to stop. It's not going to stop me from trying. Okay, and I'm not going to complain about it either, because that's life. If I'm going to sit here and complain, where's that going to get me? It doesn't do anything. Everybody here, everybody in the world has something they're living with. All right, some kind of problem. All right. If you're going to sit and compare your problem to everybody else's, you're going to have a miserable time because you're going to uh, count all the things wrong with your life and ignore all of the possibility in front of you if you just go and do it and just say to hell with it. That's the message of the manosphere. That's what these fucking guys don't understand. They refuse to understand that because that conflicts their whole ideology, which is a victimhood of maintaining the bubble that every problem in my life is because of some outside force that I can't control. And woe is me, I'm so oppressed. Oh, boo-hoo. That's their fucking whole thing, and it's so poisonous. It's poisonous. Let's go.
They don't really mean what they're saying. This is all a joke. Everybody in 4chan is a Nazi. Like they all pretend to be a
Right.
Nazi. They all pretend to be whatever.
And that
They all
becomes a
pretend to be
joke in and of itself
pedophiles.
at a point.
Exactly. And like looking back, I'm like kind of embarrassed to say this, but like I really didn't pick up on like how dangerous that was, and I just thought it was just like another way of being funny and making jokes. And this was I think this is like an extremely intentional thing. This is like the sort of thing that like white nationalists will talk about as a way of radicalizing people.
A lot of anxiety about like I'm saying edgy stuff, but like everybody here is cool with it, right? And as I got older, I would realize more and more like, just because your white friends are cool with it doesn't necessarily mean it's cool. So yeah, like I understand some of where these people like begin because I think a lot of them begin in a similar place. And I sort of saw the direction that things would go. Like I would be on forums and I would watch those forums slowly become more conservative until all the people like me kind of stopped wanting to post there. And then, the alt-right happened and Trump got elected and Charlottesville happened. And all of these things made me realize like, okay, I need to get more explicitly political in my videos.
My family, I felt like I was just fading into the background. And at school, like I went to an all boys school where like a sensitive young lad such as me sort of faded into the background. And there it was just like a very hyper masculine environment. And as a result of that, I feel like I needed to claim my own power outside of traditional masculinity. And around that time, I was like quite into anime and such. And I wasn't listening to metal music, but I listened to music that had like a good amount of edge to it. Funny thing, like in retrospect, like I didn't realize like this is depression that I was feeling. Yeah, as a result, I just sort of retreated into the things that pandered to my need to feel angry at something.
100%. Like, I think the only reason I probably don't have, a bunch of problematic shit floating out about me is because I didn't have, a Twitter account when I was 15. Like I was that kid. Like I was never as like passionate about it or identified with it as hard. But yeah, I mean like if I could go back and like all the like shitty things I said and stupid jokes I made, there were so many of them, and that is definitely not something I think back to with any degree of pride. But like I think part of the problem with a lot of this stuff is not admitting that that's a part of you growing up when it absolutely is.
So I've talked about edgelords before, but I don't know if I've ever defined them. Initially, I thought I would struggle to craft a definition that felt effective, but I was surprised to learn that Oxford and Webster dictionaries have pretty useful definitions and even an entire short article on the concept of being an edgelord. Oxford states,
a person who affects a provocative or extreme persona, especially online, typically used of a man.
So let's see. I don't think that's the most interesting section. Let's skip ahead here. Um, okay, let's I don't want this to get too long. So let's go here and then we'll probably just let that play because I would like to hear what he says about why the manosphere exists. Oh, that sounds good too though. I want to hear that too. All right, forget that though. We're just gonna start here.
You get the gist of it, I hope. I'm bringing these concepts up because they are fundamental and really important concepts for explaining and exploring the manosphere from my
You know what? Now I'm listening to him say that. I just gonna feel, all right, you know what? Forget about the length. If you don't like it, fuck off. Let's just go here. Because he's gonna say, oh, well, you skipped the part where I said how important it was. You understand the concept. So, okay, here we go. Yeah, let's listen to that.
of power and agency. Like, you don't see a ton of conventionally attractive men deep into edgelord activity. There's a lot of reasons why Hassan has set himself apart from the rest of the political streamer economy and is clearly not a big edgelord like many of his peers, and thus greatly transcends the success of that space. And yes, this is something that I wasn't fully aware of in the Break Bread video. I apologize, players.
You know, for somebody who claims to be an anti-capitalist, by the way, just to debunk that argument straight away, the only thing that matters for Hassan to be successful is whether he can appeal to an audience. This is a capitalist. He's selling himself. He's the product. Okay. So all he needs to do is appeal to a certain audience. You know there are people who agree with your point of view in politics, right? FD signifier, certainly you're aware of that. And you're also aware you live in a capitalist world, right? You would claim to be anti-capitalist, I assume. I'm not sure about that, but I would assume. So but you can't connect those dots. Hassan is appealing to an audience of people that exist. That's all you can say. His success doesn't signal anything. This is why representational is such a when people get excited about representation in media or any sort of entertainment venture, it's so ridiculous because all you're proving is that there's people who want to consume that art. It has nothing to do with anything else. Capitalism is about making money, profit. The social issues be damned. That's what makes it bad, right? That's supposed to be the problem with it, according to an anti-capitalist. So, but he's intentionally not. He can't connect those dots. There's no idea synthesis. There's a lot of words learned, a lot of vocabulary, but no ability to connect it, or either no ability or no will. You pick one is more. You choose which one is more charitable. I'm, but forget it. That's all I had to say about that. Let's let him talk more.
Up. But no shade to Hassan, who calls himself a himbo. One reason why he's so successful that I'm sure he'd admit is that he is obviously conventionally attractive, which amplifies other elements of his appeal to a wider audience, both male, female, queer, straight, poly, non-binary, whatever tags you identify with. If you are attracted to men, you're probably attracted to Hassan.
Hassan is probably the most attractive.
So I guess my first would be Hassan.
I think that he has a very nice body.
I guess Hassan's the hottest.
He's cute.
Oh.
He's really good looking. I've seen him. Oh my god. Oh my god.
And Hassan is just really, really super, super hot.
I just want to be his friend, dude. I just want to know him.
I just want to suck his dick, dude. That's all.
Why did you make Will watch this? This is like terrible.
Hello, darkness, my old friend.
Part of this is because Hassan is close to what sociologist R.W. Connell would call ideal hegemonic masculinity. Yeah, so we're going into the theory and history part of the essay. So if you don't care about the actual foundational knowledge about the shit I'm about to talk and just want to hear me shit on Gary Vee and other manosphere figures, go ahead, skip ahead. It's in the description, but you're not going to learn any new big words. I've said the term hegemonic a few times in this and other.
That was so patronizing, by the way. Who talks that way to their audience? Oh, if you don't really care about why you believe what you believe, go ahead and skip right ahead to get your dose of oxytocin when you hear my nice strong voice criticize these mean guys. Like listen to the way he's talking, like they're children, like they're, oh God, like I would hate. That's so ridiculous. That's not a serious way to engage with somebody. Come on, get real.
Other videos, so it's really important that I probably give some context to explain that. The term hegemony is a really significant term in the world of critical theory and comes from Italian Marxist philosopher Antonio Gramsci, and is basically a concept that explains how society and culture and the state dominates the frameworks through which we understand and see the world, and also how we expect the world and society to work, look, and function. Gramsci states,
what we can do for the moment is to fix two major superstructural levels. The one that can be called civil society, that is the ensemble of organisms commonly called private, and that of political society, or the state. These two levels correspond on the one hand to the function of hegemony, which the dominant group exercises throughout society, and on the other hand to that of direct domination, or command exercised through the state and juridical government.
Cultural hegemony and hegemonic thinking is really the bane of so much socially ingrained injustice that seems to be impossible to avoid no matter your identity. It's what causes comments that say man should never order fruity drinks, or that a woman who has a good job has masculine energy. Like the whole conversation right now about unions and about whether or not people deserve a livable wage is a hegemonic concept ingrained very much here in America, that somehow people that don't work hard enough should starve to death. That's an ideology we don't question, we just kind of take as true, as an axiom. That's what hegemony does. It gives you ideas that you just take as fact because that's the way it should be, without thinking about the fact that we kind of get to choose what is and what isn't in our society. And there's a Foucault quote in there somewhere about the panopticon and Durkheim on organic solidarity. This next section is going to be full of, look, I read the old white folks books stuff, so just bear with me. Hegemony.
Again, I mean, this is not for an adult audience. This is not for an audience of people seriously interested in this subject. It's not. It just isn't. This is not how you talk. Oh, there's some kind of quote somewhere. Show me the quote. You're supposed to be serious. I forgot this guy's qualifications, but I'm pretty sure he's some kind of academic, right? What are you doing? This is not serious. You're supposed to be tackling. This was such a hard video to make. Oh, it was so difficult. I worked so hard. Show it. This is garbage.
Is very much socially constructed and thus is subject to change, meaning that we agree as a society that, I don't know, dreadlocks are not professional. We'll come back to that in a second. Even though there's no explicit reason to think of how someone wears a hairstyle as indicative of their ability to work a particular job. But sadly, many people treat social constructions such as hair and fashion and gender as immutable and natural things, and will fight for them even when the fight doesn't really involve them, in order to maintain a natural order, in order to maintain hegemony. This brings us to the concept of hegemonic masculinity, crafted by sociologist R.W. Connell with support by James Messerschmidt. Simply put, Connell took the concept of hegemony and expanded it to the performance of masculinity, i.e., what culturally idealized and prescribed features should a person performing masculinity have. Again, these things change from culture to culture, space to space, and time to time. Black men in America who are marginalized because of race still have a framework of masculinity within community that they adhere to and aspire to, and is different from what white men do or Latino men do, or what black men might do in other parts of the world, or what they did 20 years ago in a lot of ways. Even among queer men, there's going to be...
So this guy just said there are fundamental differences between black and white men when it comes to behavior.
Nuances and a hierarchy around what a good man is and what a good man is not. And yes, there is a feminine counterpart, but this video is long enough. But it's basically pick me. It's not that hard to get. Another foundational concept that I want to bring.
It's basically pick. That's how he summarizes it. I mean, it's so bad faith. It's so dishonest. And I'm gonna let him talk, and then I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna talk more about this whole thing. So don't worry, I'm not skipping over stuff.
Is what Connell calls the patriarchal dividend. This is a fancier way of saying the material or psychological manifestation of male privilege. All men, and yes, that includes not just white, but BIPOC, queer, trans, etc. men, benefit on some level from our patriarchal system, some obviously much more than others. No matter how much they align with women, no matter how they vote, no matter the various other intersections through which patriarchy may also hurt them, within a patriarchal society, there will always be a continuum of privilege between men and non-men. That is the patriarchal dividend. But the thing is, for some men, especially men who clearly are very close to the aforementioned masculine ideal, aka someone like Hassan, or some of these men can often feel like what they're getting isn't what they're really owed, that they're not getting enough of that patriarchal dividend. They feel like they're doing the right things, performing masculinity in the appropriate way, upholding the appropriate values, but they don't see the results they believe they're supposed to get. They're not getting the job, they're not getting the girl, they're not getting the respect. There's a specific feeling that comes from this that sociologist Michael Kimmel calls aggrieved entitlement. And I want to quickly mention that Kimmel, who...
I think I've heard it, So what he just said before the before the aggrieved entitlement part. He said these guys, guys are doing what they feel like they're supposed to be doing, and it's not working out for them, and they're frustrated, and they're I guess he says that's a bad thing. I don't remember the exact word he used. And then he says, oh, this sociologist came up with this idea, aggrieved entitlement, which is a ridiculous. I mean, just listen to those wording, the way they choose to title it. I mean, that says all you need to know about what they're going to say about it. I mean, he called it aggrieved entitlement. This is not a sympathetic way to look at it. The sympathetic view would be, yeah, why isn't it working? They are doing the same thing that the thing they think they're supposed to be doing as best they're hearing it from society, right? They're hearing from society how you're supposed to treat women, how you're supposed to act. Respect them. They're the prize. You have to do everything to earn their favor. And if you ever do anything, and if the relationship ever ends, it's going to be your fault. If you don't earn enough money, they're not going to like you. If you're not tall enough, they're not going to like you. And you just have to live with that because that's just the way life is, brother. But you think that reacting to that and by lashing out and being like, wait, that's really that sucks. I don't like that. That's a shitty deal. I'm gonna opt out, or just say fuck you and do whatever I want anyway. You think that is a aggrieved entitlement? It's the opposite of entitlement. I'm admitting, oh, yeah, well, fine. If you're not gonna give me anything, then fuck you. I'll go get whatever I want myself, and to hell with whatever the consequences. I'm just gonna go for it, right? How is that entitlement? How is it I mean, aggrieved maybe. All right, I'll give you that. Aggrieved. I do have a grievance, sure, against society, the way it treats us, the way it teaches men and women. The way I do have a grievance against that. Am I entitled? No, it's the opposite of that. It's the exact opposite. You can tell by the title that they're not willing to engage with this seriously.
Who is one of the more prominent figures in masculine studies in sociology, has in the past few years had his own rash of accusations of workplace bullying and sexism, the irony of which is not lost on me. However, his work still stands as some of the more insightful academic texts in the studies of masculinities. Quick aside, none of the great thinkers that provide us with some of the more important academic theories are without fault or with bad takes. Bell Hooks had more than a few bad takes on black men that did not age well, and really hated Beyonce. Was not a fan. W.E.B. Du Bois was a proponent of eugenics later in his life, and Karl Marx was a fuckboy. So stop deifying the theorists. Let's just rock with the theory.
It's just an incredible thing to say. Karl Marx was a fuckboy. No justification. It's not a serious video.
Theory as much as it is useful to us, and so that's what we're going to do here. Kimmel describes aggrieved entitlement as a sense of shame and frustration and eventually rage that comes from men who feel like their patriarchal dividend has been denied in some way.
Do they feel that way, or is that what's happened? It's because you can't. Do they feel that way, or is that what's happened? Answer me that. Because you would admit, you have to work harder today to succeed as any person, but that goes for men because men are the ones who are expected to earn for their families. So if it's harder today, then that means men have it harder. Yes, they do. So do they feel like they're aggrieved, or are they in fact aggrieved? Which is it? Don't play word games. All right? Don't play word games.
He states
that shame and humiliation underlie basically all violence. Because I feel small, I will make you feel smaller. In my interviews with extremists, both actives and formers, I have found time and time again that they've experienced that sense of humiliation and shame. At least in the case of the German, Swedish, and American guys that I interviewed, sometimes it is not really political at all. Many of them, especially the American guys, were sexually abused, beat up, bullied as children. Some of them have basically the same sort of profile as the victims of Catholic priests. Growing up, they were deeply ashamed of themselves. They didn't do well in school. They didn't have friends. They were sad, miserable, and they escaped into themselves. That just made them better targets, and the far right drew them in.
I'm going to interchange.
This is an important moment. This is a really important moment. So I want to point out what that guy just said, that other video. And by the way, it's funny, that was a much more coherent thought than anything Signifier has said so far. But what that other guy said was, I'm going to summarize it. The far right needs men at their weakest point, right? They need men who have been rejected by society or whatever. Hope, younger guys with no direction, rejected. They feel hopeless. They feel like nothing they're going to do is working. These are guys really dangerous, at risk of total nihilism, suicide risk, depression, anxiety. This is the state of a lot of modern men. Sadly, it is, and a lot of young guys feel this way. I was one of them. I was. So, but here's what the other guy admits. He admits this. He says the far right needs guys like that. They need guys like that to recruit because they need somebody weak to prey on. But but what's the implication of that? What's the implication of that thought on the flip side? The flip side is that if you're a liberal and you also want to convince them that you're right first, you also need to target those guys, right? They're tacitly admitting through this argument that the guys that are ripest to be converted to one ideology or the other are these weak, vulnerable guys. And they're putting themselves on the level with the far right. They're admitting it's our ideology versus theirs. We've got to dive into them first. We have to. These are the guys we got to target. These are the most vulnerable. Well, at least this would be the logical conclusion. But if you start calling white men vulnerable, you're going to run into problems. But just think about that. That's all I'm saying. Think about that. That's a really important thing. If you really want to follow this line of liberal illogic, realize that they're putting themselves on par with the alt-right. And by the way, the Manosphere is not the alt-right. I don't know why this keeps. At no point have they justified that connection. At no point. I've been following the Manosphere for months at this point. And I'm gonna tell you, I watch a lot of YouTube content. I'm in the gym a lot. I work out. I have a lot of free time. I'm a writer, so I have this time to consume this content, and I've been consuming it like crazy. I haven't heard a single alt-right. And in fact, a lot of the guys that I follow are black. Kevin Samuels. I was talking about Poor Man's Podcast. Rest in peace, Kevin Samuels. By the way, the guy was incredible. And I before he died, I had the wrong impression of him because I had no idea who he was. I just never looked into him. I didn't really care. But I found out later, and really when I needed to hear it. I'm at a point in my life now where I needed it. And I wish I was following him when he was alive. But I'm glad the content's still there. Anyway, a lot of these guys are black. Fresh and fit guys, the mediocre tutorials and reviews guys. These are black guys. This is not all. This has nothing to do with alt right. In fact, it's not really political at all. If you really listen to the message, it's nothing to do with politics. I've already said it's about self-improvement. Why this connection to the alt right? It's not been justified ever. There's no reason to be talking about it in this context. You're not dissecting the Manosphere. You're talking about the alt right for some reason. What are you doing?
Interchangeably refer to aggrieved entitlement and main character syndrome because they're kind of the same thing. It's just one was said by a big sociologist, but you get the gist of it, I hope. I'm bringing these concepts up because they are fundamental and really important concepts for explaining and exploring the Manosphere from my perspective. The Manosphere is a loose network of mostly online communities and media entities with a wide variety of ideologies and styles and arguments, but all of them agree with one major core tenet, which is that modern men are in a state of crisis, and 9 times out of 10, the next thing they'll say is because of women. And before I get into all the ways in which they're wrong about many things, I want to point out as a whole that these men are definitely correct to at least feel like something is wrong. Men of all races are in a state of crisis, and for white men, this crisis is made more complicated by the emergence of widely accepted critical theories such as postmodernism, intersectional feminism, critical race theory, etc., that are reframing the way we understand race and gender, slowly eroding at the hegemonic space of power for them for the first time in modern history. It's no wonder that you'll hear of those philosophical movements I just mentioned as dangerous to civilization. For the first time in history,
This is another example of their circular logic. So earlier, if you remember, he was talking about hegemony and how growing up under hegemonic ideologies will convert you to that ideology necessarily. That's the purpose of it. So he's saying that if men are toxic, then they're brought up to be that way, right? It's hegemonic, and men have implemented that system, right? Other men anyway. So therefore, it's men that are to blame ultimately. If anything is wrong for men in society, it's because of men, right? That's their logic. But ultimately, the point is that the society shapes the person, right? So the society itself is toxic, and therefore the men come out toxic, right? That's what they're saying. But now he's also saying that the reverse is also true. That men, by their very nature, are making the world toxic, right? So Which one is it? Are men born and then cultivated to be toxic by a toxic culture, or are they already born toxic and their inborn traits are just coming out and shaping the world that they dominate, right? It's a circular argument, and you'd probably say it's both, right? I mean, there's no way to penetrate that because you're not saying anything. You're saying that both is true. You're saying it can be heads and tails at the same time.
Some white men have something they've never really had before: fear of social repercussions, aka accountability. Between Me Too and cancel culture and camera phones, etc., white men for the first time have. You get the gist of it, I hope. I'm bringing these concepts up because they are fundamental and really important concepts for explaining and exploring the manosphere from my perspective. The manosphere is a loose network of mostly online communities and media entities with a wide variety of ideologies and styles and arguments, but all of them agree with one major core tenet, which is that modern men are in a state of crisis, and 9 times out of 10, the next thing they'll say is because of women. And before I get into all the ways in which they're wrong about many things, I want to point out as a whole that these men are definitely correct to at least feel like something is wrong. Men of all races are in a state of crisis, and for white men,
at least we
this
have that
crisis
admission
is made
there.
more complicated by the emergence of widely accepted critical theories such as postmodernism, intersectional feminism, critical race theory, etc., that are reframing the way we understand race and gender, slowly eroding at the hegemonic space of power for them for the first time in modern history. It's no wonder that you'll hear of those philosophical movements I just mentioned as dangerous to civilization. For the first time in history, some white men have something they've never really had before: fear of social repercussions, aka accountability. Between Me Too and cancel culture and camera phones, etc., white men for the first time have to at least think about the consequences of acting upon their racial and gender privilege. They need to make sure no one has camera phones when they throw their racist frat parties. They need to think about what they're going to say on live streams in case something gets clipped out of context. They need to make sure that the group text chats full of racist and sexist conversations don't have their real names on it. Now, in reality, all of this doesn't amount to a lot of real material differences for everyone else. Getting 1 or 2 white men fired from their job or embarrassed and dragged online for being racist is not really the revolution we've been working towards, and definitely not the great replacement that many white men seem to fear. But there's this old saying that when you're used to privilege, equity can feel like oppression. And that's what we see and get from so many white reactionary manosphere type spaces. They don't understand this feeling of essentially being racialized as white men and understanding that it means something that maybe it didn't mean just a few years ago. However, it's deeper than that. One thing that we need to be far more critical of is the fact that all men, including white men, are dealing with numerous challenges that have eroded at their mental, physical, and economic health over the last 30 plus years or so. Many of you probably are aware that white men account for a disparate amount of suicides in America, with some studies having them responsible for up to 70% of suicides in the States. In UK, men's suicides are over 3 times as likely than for women. And rates of suicide in the UK and the US have risen over the last 20 years greatly because of the suicide of white men. Suicide strongly correlates to social issues and economics and health. So white men notwithstanding, suicide rates for Native Americans, the disabled, queer, and queer youth are higher than any other population, which should provide some perspective on the real structural issues in our society and how that arose in our mental health. However, with those populations, I think we have some understanding as to why that's the case. We know why queer people and queer youth turn to self-harm in a society that constantly prosecutes them. We have well-developed understandings for these disparities. For white men who occupy such a clear space of privilege in the US, and I'm sure in the UK as well, why is there such a disparity? Why are these boys and men killing themselves while at least on paper they should have way less to be concerned about? The data and research points to things like mental illness, substance addiction, as well as economic and social instability, and an absence of effective coping mechanisms, often exacerbated by an adherence to classical views of masculinity. Suicide among white men is more common in rural areas, which have higher poverty, as well as higher access to guns and lower access to quality health care. Yet, and you all know this, these same rural areas vote against any and all progressive policies that might help them because they, like most of America, are very conservative, because conservatism in America is part of their hegemony, at least in a specific demonstrable sense. And this is the enduring.
At least in a specific demonstrable sense. Conservatism. This is a time in America. I'm recording this on June 24th. This was released, I don't know, a month, I don't know, 3 weeks ago or something. So the president is Joseph R. Biden, Joseph Robinette. The vice president is Kamala Harris, black woman. Congress is dominated by Democrats, both houses. And Supreme Court is conservative, I'll give you that. In fact, R.I.P. Roe v. Wade bit the dust today. You hate to see it. And then, so he's saying that and by the way, name me how many conservative universities are there? We're talking about them, and this guy, by the way, a product of those universities, of those very institutions, which I hope well, he would claim to criticize, but I doubt he's got any substantive thing to say about it. But he's a product of these institutions as well. And does he seem very conservative? Does he seem like And do you think there's a lot of people in his university classes disagreeing with him? A lot of conservatives in there speaking up and arguing about these concepts? I really doubt it. These are liberal echo chambers. These are universities. Okay, we're talking about. If you're going to tell me that universities are dominated by conservatives, get real. You're not in touch with reality. You're not in touch with reality here.
Paradox of the crisis of men. There is a hegemonic hold that often has to be severed first, or at least greatly weakened, before boys and men are able to actually deal with the problems they all face, which is living as men under late capitalism, being the gears in a capitalist patriarchal system that benefits them, definitely, but also consumes them as fuel. Ian Danskin describes this in his alt-right playbook series, specifically on the video How to Radicalize a Normie.
Gabe has concerns like economic precarity, not knowing his place in a changing world, stressful working conditions. In other words, Gabe is suffering under late capitalism, same as everyone.
Pretty much all the things that are said there to be plaguing men, especially white men, can be explained through understanding the exploitative nature of capitalism and how men play a specific and important role in the maintenance of capitalism, a role that for the vast majority of them requires a traumatizing debasement of their sense of self and humanity. Men have to be the arbiters and vectors of patriarchal power. Patriarchy does not work with our support. We are the glue that keeps that machine together. But consider how glue is made. I'm reminded of Boxer from George Orwell's Animal Farm. Long story short, the animals are the proletariat and the pigs are the bourgeois, and you should really read the book. It's like 100 pages long. It's a good one. Boxer is a horse, and he is the strongest and hardest working of all the other animals. He neglects his physical health as well as his intellectual development to focus on his role of being the workhorse, which is an esteemed and valued role that brings some admiration and respect from his peers, even though as he works harder, he is slowly destroying his body. He does this without question because he believes that in the end, the pigs who have all the real power will reward him for his toil and dedication in the social order that he's helped build, that is impossible to create without his help. This is the plight.
By the way, this is an argument. If you know anything about Orwell, he was an anti-communist. The book is supposed to be about communism and about how the pigs are the state, right? The social order they've created is supposed to be one for all, right? Everybody, one person's labor is supposed to support, or everybody relies on one person and you're just doing it for the good of all. But look you're working yourself to death, right? That's supposed to be the message. This is an anti-communist message, right? The irony is that nobody, even under communism, would be expected to work for anybody but themselves and their family. That's the whole point. That's the whole point. So the irony is that Orwell didn't know what the fuck he was talking about, right? But now you're now Orwell's dumbass argument. You're going to flip it around and try to act like it's for capitalism. But in capitalism, it's obvious that nobody works for the love of work. You work because you have a family to support. This is especially true for men. You have a family. You want to support a family one day. You want to build a legacy. You want to leave behind a mark on the world. That's a manly trait. That's what we want. We want to feel like we contributed something, like we mattered. We want to feel appreciated, not just by uh, but for our values, for what we are as men, the things that make us good and interesting and powerful and smart, and all these good traits that we feel like we have, or that every man does have in some respects, and every person has, I'm willing to say, in every respect. But that's what you know. Let's keep going.
Of men right now. Much like Boxer, many men are intensely aligned and performance of their role in society gives them rewards and will give them their patriarchal dividend, will make them the main character of their story. And much like Boxer, they are guaranteed nothing, no matter what they do, unless, of course, they can somehow find themselves a pathway to the top of the hierarchy, which very, very few men of any race are capable of doing when they have to actually start from scratch. And the Manosphere in various ways offers the false promise of fixing this problem, of making you a man so great that you'll definitely get the dividend you've always wanted. The promise of giving you a map to be the main character that you've always wanted to be. This messaging works because these boys and men, whether they're edgelords or good-looking petite bourgeois boys of relative privilege, feel the squeeze, feel the sense of existential dread, and they want to address it. They want to address what are actually the failures and limitations of patriarchy under capitalism with performing patriarchy under capitalism. So today we have men from Gen X, Millennials, Gen Z, and soon to be Gen Alpha.
I'm going to tell you that the problem that this guy has with this is not the message itself, but that the message works. That's why he's mad. That's why he's actually mad. He won't say that because the message itself is there's nothing. It's just a different perspective, right? You can't claim that the message itself is wrong because all you're saying is that instead of attributing all of his problems to society, he's choosing to instead of doing that, he's choosing to ignore those problems and just focus on making himself the best person he can be, right? All that is a change of perspective. You can make moral arguments if you want about which one is right or wrong, but all it is a change of perspective. Now, his real issue can't be the message. He can't say that the message is evil. So it must be that the message is functional, that it works. That if you choose to ignore the problems caused by the ways that your life is a little bit harder because of society, if you choose to just say fuck that and do what you feel like you have to do to make it in the world, you will be happier. It's just giving yourself a purpose, right? It's a way of coping with the world. You're in this world, you might as well live in it. If you're gonna live. Do what you feel like you have to, and don't ignore it. Don't suppress it. Stop pretending like you don't want to go make money and support a woman and start a family. Don't pretend like you don't want that if you do want that, okay? I'm not saying everybody does. I don't know any guys that don't, but I'm sure they exist, right? Somewhere. I don't know them, but I'm sure this guy may be one. I don't know. So I doubt it, though, to be honest with you. But he would love to have a wife, right, and kids one day. I bet. Maybe he does already. I don't know. But anyway, men want that. That's what we want. We want families, by and large. And in order to build a family, you need to be able to support one. That's a manly trait. That's a manly trait. And even a feminist would expect, well, you got to at least bring half, right? A feminist would want you to bring at least half. Well, you got to do that, right? You got to be able to do that at least, right? You got to work. You got to go do something. So it's about putting the blinders on. That's what this is all supposed to be about. And that's his real problem with this, is that it's a direct alternative to their give up ideology, to their victim mentality. Woe is me, because they succeed on this victim mentality. It's the dopamine drip. It's like they're coming around to coo you and pet you. Oh, you poor little baby, your life is so hard. Just keep voting for me, and I'm going to make it better for you. Okay, don't worry. Just keep voting for me. I promise. Hey, we're right around the corner. Hey, those big mean Republicans, they're going to take away all your rights. You don't want that. You don't want that. You better vote for me. I'll make sure that doesn't happen, but you got to vote for me. That's their whole ooh. I mean, I said ooh already, but you see where I'm going with this. This is the ideology they rely on. It's a fraud. It's all a fraud to get you to buy into their cult. That's it.
As the oldest of them are entering puberty and they're going to start Googling shit on YouTube and TikTok, and they're going to be grappling with the concept of performing masculinity and fearing the possibility of failing at it and suffering numerous consequences, or succeeding and suffering other consequences. And that's one thing I also want to get across here, is that much of the manosphere historically and now is built upon a fear response. As boys, we fear that poor performance of masculinity can contribute to bullying and ostracism, which it does. As men, we fear that it will lead to low prospects for intimate partnership and professional success, which it does. Then, for a lot of men who ostensibly do perform masculinity effectively, unless they are at the top of the food chain, they will still be susceptible to the harms of late capitalism in the form of exploitative and dehumanizing work.
You know, it's funny because any Manosphere guy but when he started that sentence, when he said, even if you do perform, traditionally masculine XXX, every guy who's familiar with the content says, women still won't want you, and that sucks, right? Because women are fucked up right now a little bit, modern women anyway. This is about modern women, of course. But uh, but instead of that, he veers off course because that you can see how they have to they have to give you so much that's just inarguably true, right? And then right at the last moment they just, well, but it's not for that reason, right? The obvious reason. No, it's not for the provable reason that women want the top 20% of guys, right? Every woman wants the top 20% of guys. It's not that that's a provable fact, right? With data. Forget about that part. No, it's actually because of all this other nonsense, these other ethereal, societal level problems that you can't hope to compete with. So don't worry about it. Just vote for us.
Low wages, poor health practices, etc. And even those at the top of the top still have to contend with the erosion of their soul. This is the infected foundation underneath all of this nonsense that ties it all together and makes the manosphere seem to have such widespread reach, as it makes it possible for someone to start out just wanting to build some muscle or learn how to talk to girls or searching for their favorite anime character and end up arguing for things like enforced monogamy, sex redistribution, or that women should be denied the right to vote.
What Manosphere content creator is saying that? I want to know. I want to know who that is. I want to see these people. Who are they? Kevin Samuels ever said that? Of course not. I mean, who the fuck are you talking about? You're just making shit up.
Scary and hard thing to understand is that, like most social ills, the worst parts of the manosphere stem from a very valid and very universal sense of anguish in men. And we have to contend with and process this if we are ever going to seriously address how to fix the problems that the manosphere presents to us. Up until now, I've mostly been talking only about white men and boys. And while there is plenty of diversity in all of these groups, there are some distinct differences.
Okay, so for the first time now, he's going to talk about black people here. Right? So this is the first time he's not for an hour and 15 minutes in the video, right? This is going to be the first time where he hasn't tried to connect the manosphere with the alt right, or maybe he still will somehow. I don't know. I'd love to see. I'm interested in. That's why I wanted to watch this part because so far, without justification, with no justification whatsoever, at no point does he explain why he's connecting the two. Does he give any examples? No. Does he provide any evidence, studies, sociological surveys, right? He's a sociologist? No, nothing like that. Nothing. No papers. Nothing. Nothing to back up. Not even the flimsiest argument to explain why the manosphere needs to be connected with the alt-right like this. And so anyway, an hour and 20 minutes in the video, he's going to finally talk about black people, and let's see if he manages to connect this to the alt-right. Let's hear it.
And what most refer to as the black manosphere, which has grown a lot in terms of visibility in the last few years with figures like
I haven't actually
Kevin
seen this part
Samuels
yet. I did stop watching it and start recording the videos.
Get
This
to
is
that
new to
later.
me.
That said, the black manosphere is not new, and to be fair, at least on YouTube, it's probably been around a lot longer in its current state than its white counterparts. And I think it's important to parse out some of these differences before moving on, because we want to keep in mind that these two groups definitely converge in some areas, but separate in others. Unlike his white counterpart, the black manosphere has the benefit of being able to subterfuge a lot of his elements under the guise of pro-black thought and political discourse.
Okay, subterfuge. Exercise his subterfuge. Once again, never at any point did he explain where the subterfuge is. Why is it bad? What is the connection with the alt-right? Now it's subterfuge that the black guys are hiding under their nefarious arguments.
Many, not all, but many of the figures in the black manosphere present themselves as pro-black political figures and talking heads in conjunction with being male advocates, and they just happen to peddle conservative, misogynistic, and every once in a while homophobic rhetoric as solutions to the.
I mean, show me one time when Kevin Samuels was misogynistic or homophobic. I've seen a lot of his content Not once did I ever hear him say anything that was either misogynistic or homophobic. If talking to women, these delusional, by the way, women, and by the way, if you're saying that this is representative, the women that he speaks to, and the women that go viral in his show, if you're saying that those are representative of the average woman, then you're making a pretty bad judgment of most women, I'd say, in my opinion. And maybe you're making the same kind of judgment a lot of men are making, right? But a lot of other men, I'm sorry, that are making, you know. But if you tell me Kevin Samuels being direct with a delusional woman, and trying to shake some reality into her for her own good, if you think that that's him being a misogynist, then you have such a ridiculous standard for misogyny that it's really patronizing to women. I would think that you don't respect women, in fact, because you're not even willing to be honest to them. You want to coddle them at all times. That's what you want. You want to be a feminist.
Issues that black people face.
I'm just saying to anybody, we can't be pro-black if you are. How are you pro-black and not married? This is my issue with a lot of the pro-black movement, especially a lot of pro-black women. I need to see your husband.
The insecurities and frustrations for black men that attract them.
And what's wrong with that? He's saying that you should be married and have a family. If you care about the black people and building black people as a community, right? If this is your goal, according to Kevin Samuels, then get married and start a family. Get married. Don't be having kids. Don't have kids and not be married. That's the point that he always makes. Having kids outside of marriage is the dumbest thing you can do, especially for a woman. Especially for a woman. That's the point he's making. You will absolutely ruin your life if you have a child outside of wedlock. In all likelihood, maybe you luck out. Maybe you're really hot and young and you still get away with it because some guy comes along and he's willing to take care of someone else's kid for you. But that's pretty unlikely. Let's be honest. Especially as you get older. So Kevin Samuel's point is if you want a family, a stable family, find a man, make him commit to you first, and then give him a child. That's the point. That's all. And how is that unreasonable? That's common sense. Are you advocating for the opposite? You think there should be more single mothers? Do you think that? I mean, come on.
To the manosphere is pretty much the same as their white counterparts, except that those frustrations, the financial insecurity, the ugly breaks up and divorces, child custody battles, etc., are all made a bit more complicated by structural racism. And along with that, because of structural racism, they also are dealing with high death rates, lower access to healthcare, and barriers to a lot of the ways that the manosphere preaches for seeking self-help. Historically, the nature of patriarchy has mostly excluded black men in a traditional sense. Black men as a whole have never fully encapsulated the patriarchal image of father knows best, doting wife, 2 kids, and a dog. Even those black men that did have those things were always still barred from the full essence of what that framework was supposed to offer in terms of respect and stability. You can be black and be the man of the house and the man in your neighborhood, but you were still going to be called boy when the police came around. Plenty of black men between the 1920s and the 1960s contributed to traditional male-centered communities and played roles as patriarchs in them, only for them to be burned down by white terrorist mobs. However, I would argue that more typically the black manosphere grows out of conservative pro-black movements. As I alluded to in previous videos, older generations of black people who faced a more intense and overtly hostile world of racism and also bore witness to really ugly images and experiences of crime and violence from their own people in black neighborhoods were very susceptible to a line of thinking that said that black people's biggest problems was themselves, and that if we just rejected the uglier and negative aspects of black life and culture and focused more into mimicking what we saw from whiteness, that we would be better off as a people. And to be fair, this isn't wholly untrue. Being closer to whiteness has always been good for people of color, so lighter skinned black people with certain types of hair or phenotypical features or even names are historically much more likely to fare better in America under white supremacy.
So I hope this is coming out loud and clear to any black guys who appreciate Manosphere content. I mean, listen to what he's saying. He's saying that your enjoyment of the process of bettering yourself, of becoming a stronger man, a better man, a more higher value man, your process of chasing that dream of yours, that goal that you've always had, of always looking forward to a better future and wanting a woman. The only thing you're asking really is a woman who appreciates that and is willing to devote herself to be worthy of your eventual status, right? That you hope to attain one day, right? That you're going to work for. he's saying that is a white man's idea. That's an idea that comes from white guys, right? You don't like that? No, no, no. That's the bad white man's idea. Like, are you kidding me? You tell me what is about that needs to come from a white guy. How come a black guy can't come up with that himself? That sounds perfectly reasonable to anybody. I'd say. I think most men who hear that say, "Yep, sounds good to me." And whether white or black or any other race, they're going to say, "Yeah, I agree. I want to live my life as an identity as a man that is inborn in my traits and my genetics, which is to spread on my genes. And the best way I know how to do that is to attract a woman, and the best way I know how to do that is to collect resources." Because that's what they like. And that's great. And I like women and I want women around me, so I want to do more of that, right? How is that something that needs to come from white people? That's fucked up. That's patronizing. I mean, if he's not black, he's racist to me. That sounds racist. What the fuck?
But as I alluded to in the edge,
If any white guy said that, that'd be racist
crime
as
and
hell.
criminality is socially determined by poverty and lack in environment and structural barriers, and the ability,
according to
of a
him
handful
anyway,
of black folks to effectively maneuver white supremacy using what we call respectability politics is not a real solution to the issues that black people face. The core factor to crime in black communities is how these communities are designed and policed, not how the people behave or wear their hair or wear their pants. A good way to understand this is to look at something like the opioid epidemic versus the crack epidemic. When crack began to ravage black communities in the 80s, the response was tougher policing, longer prison sentences, and more police on the street, sending thousands of black men to jail for petty drug offenses. While they also passed laws that greatly criminalized the possession of crack in black neighborhoods, but barely criminalized the possession of the much more potent cocaine in white communities.
Reverend Cecil Williams thinks law enforcement crackdowns like the one just announced for Washington, D.C., sweep up the victims as well as the dealers.
There'll be warfare. We will see large numbers of poor people, and specifically blacks, going to jail and to prison, and they will not have a chance to live, to have a productive life. By 1995, more blacks would have gone through the criminal justice system. We're predicting 70% at this time, going through the criminal justice system. Now, I ask you, isn't that the way to completely eradicate a race of people?
But then, as opioids along with meth surged in white communities over the last decade or so, the policy response has been treatment and mental health services and deterrence programs and community engagement that don't ravage these communities. This is the difference between an addict in recovery moving on with his life versus a convicted felon who is unable to find meaningful employment after a lengthy prison sentence during which his community suffered in his absence, which also raises the possibility of recidivism. But a lot of people don't understand this, and so the strong sentiment in a lot of pro-black spaces is that the key to black liberation is the restoration of the black family into a line-said black family with the traditional images of family normalized to us by the Western white world, aka hegemony. They don't recognize a system that will always...
It's not hegemony. It's basic human nature. It's not hegemony that men desire women. It's not hegemony that women desire children. It's not, and nor is it hegemony that men desire children for the same reasons. Okay, and it's not hegemony that women are more adept at thinking long term in terms of resources and in terms of security. That's what women are good at because they are weaker physically, slower. They're going to eventually they want to get pregnant and have a child, which is they're going to be very vulnerable, highly vulnerable during that time. You need a man there around you. You need a man because there are other men in the world who are threats to you in that time, to your safety, to the safety of your child when your child is born. You need a man there. There's nothing hegemonic about that. That's simple evolution. That's a simple logical thought process. 200,000 years ago, our ancestors, your great times a million grandmother, all right, was not fucking worried about her rights. Okay, she was worried about keeping her man around because that's the guy who's going to protect her from those other guys, right? Were they in love? I don't know. I hope so, but let's be honest. Is there room for a lot of love in something like that? That's where we came from. That's where we come from. Okay, this concept, this idea of love is totally new. So anyway, that's inborn. That's inborn. You can't get rid of that. And why deny it? I mean, that's inborn to everybody. Every man, every woman feels that on some level, I think, you know? I mean, except for, well, I'm talking about straight men and women, right? Men. And I think, okay, let me walk it back. It's not every. It's clearly not every. I think it's a lot. I think it's the majority, the vast majority, in my opinion. I kept going up there. It's vast majority for sure. I'm going to settle there. I'm going to settle on vast majority, all right? Downgraded from every down to vast majority of men and women feel this way. I believe that.
Find ways to take us out regardless of how well we perform whiteness. But because that dream is so enticing, a lot of enterprising grifters have constantly presented this idea of fixing the black community through the black family by making it look more like what we think white families look like, which of course often leads to blaming black women on not allowing black men to effectively lead, a narrative made very famous by the Moynihan Report from 1965. The Moynihan Report was a federal report by sociologist something Moynihan. Fuck 'em. In this report, which is a favorite staple of the black manosphere as well as black conservatives, characterized black men as infantile and lazy and uninterested in self-betterment, partly because black women emasculate them. As a cherry on top, the report, which offered no real solutions, gave one prescription that said that maybe these black men should join the army as a way to reclaim their masculinity. More on that in a later video, but just understand that this report came right in time for the Vietnam War. What a coincidence. This report has been lambasted by a variety of black scholars for its complete absolvement of the constraints of white supremacy and the legacy of white terrorism on these issues that black people face in terms of their families in these communities, as well as its oversimplistic views on gender dynamics between black men and women. It's a report hated both by scholars who discuss black masculinity and by intersectional feminist scholars, yet it's a favorite of the black manosphere because it gives credence to the conservative talking point that the problem with the black family is black women.
Society, they did not expect to happen what happened. Go read the Moynihan Report and Moynihan Scissors. They did not expect to give government assistance and food stamps to the black community.
Okay, this is not true. I mean, how about you just show us then? How about you prove that? How about you prove it's not true? Show us where it says that, where you know where you're getting that from. Anyway, I'm going to stop. I'm not going to watch anymore because I think we see where this is going from here. But I just want to say one last thing. So, his whole point is that you know, at least when it comes to black families, but I think this is true for all families. So I'm just going to talk about it. I think that the problem with a lot of families and especially younger families, young relationships, one I was in recently, it's a problem that women and men are misled and lied to by this indoctrination that is called feminism. Okay, here's the thing that feminism accomplished. Think back to, as I was pointing out, like prehistoric times, way back in caveman days, right? Type shit. And you've got a man and a woman, and I explained how simple their relationship needs to be, right, for each of them. If survival is so is so important to you that you know, like that's to them that's a daily proposition, right? Survival, and I presume, right? Let's put yourself in that perspective. You don't really care about love. There's no real time for that, and especially if you desire to pass on your genes, which everybody does. You're just going to try to accomplish that by any means necessary. That means choosing the best guy for the job. Okay. Again, this is inborn. So now, as society develops, and this is true for any society, that has to be this is a symbiotic relationship between men and women. Men and women exist on a plane that are and they're separate from each other. I'm talking about our roles in evolution. This is inarguable stuff. This is human nature, right? This is how we cohabitated. This is how society must. This is how we must have come together and lived forever. And you can observe it in other animals too. This is how it works. So you have this relationship to each other, and one fills a role, and the other fills another role, and that's just how it works good that way. That's what we're built for. Men are built. Our bodies are large. We're strong to fight other men, to protect you from other men, and also other dangers like animals or whatever. I don't know, anything. And we're also there to provide for you. And let me tell you, the reason we do this is because it brings us a lot of joy. It makes us feel purposeful. It's this great, you know, it's an incredible feeling, you know, to feel a sense of purpose. And my purpose is taking care of somebody who appreciates that in return. She is not only getting what I want to give her, but she's grateful for it. and gives me what I want in return. And it's we're very happy in that regard. And it works very well. And that was how society functioned forever, right? Forever until like 30 years ago, right? Until like maybe like 50, I don't know, 50 years ago or something like that, right? That's when this stopped. That's when this stopped being true. And you're going to tell me that in the last 50 years we cracked the code on human interaction between men and women, and the eons of evolution behind us we can safely ignore that now. We can safely move on. This is the lie that feminism teaches you. Feminism, if you want to be real about it, it should be uh, equal opportunity to do whatever the hell you want. And if that and most of you are going to choose, we should be honest about this. Most of you probably deep down, if you're honest with yourself, really want the so-called traditional arrangement because it works. It's satisfying. It scratches that primal itch that we all have for most of us, right? For the vast majority is what I was settling on. So feminism asks us to ignore that, our human nature. And that's of course a problem. And of course, if women are the ones that are primarily fed the bullshit, if they're the ones that are the most indoctrinated by this system, then of course they're going to be the primary problem, right? This is true for black families or white families or any other family. The modern woman is the one that's most propped up, has her ego most inflated by this communication of feminism where all women are queens. You deserve a man who treats you like a princess at all times and a queen and loves you and die for you, but you don't have to give him anything. You're fine the way you're perfect the way you are. Everything about you is ideal no matter what, right? Your weight doesn't matter what you look like, doesn't matter how many men you've been with, it doesn't matter, it doesn't matter what anything at all. You're just supposed to be the prize, period. End of story. And that is just so silly. It's so ridiculous, right? And that you can walk all over your man if you want. You can have a man whipped, and then that's good. That's a good thing to be. Like if you have a man that's whipped, that's really good. If you're a bad bitch, right? Like you're running through guys, so they're not running through you, right? No, 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 no. I'm running through them, right? Huh? Sure, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, right? This is and that if you live this life that men are just gonna eventually one day settle down for you, and it's a lie, and it's a toxic lie, and it hurts men and it hurts women, but it primarily affects women because they're the ones who are targeted with the message. So yes, women, I believe, if there's an epidemic of modern relationships, problems in modern relationships, I do believe it is caused primarily by women. Men understand this stuff instinctively, at least past a certain age, at least most men, right? If you're if you're really honest with yourself, you get it, right? You don't have to really be taught this. I mean, but women, man, it's tough to unwind. It's tough to unwind this level of entanglement. So anyway, that's all I had to say. Thanks for, I don't know if anybody watches this shit. Anyway, bye.